issue X, Flav. And I actually called this show to order because you and I had talked about a while ago. We didn't really talk. We kind of debated about the idea of defund the police. I
Uh-huh.
think it started when I said that I wasn't actually keen on defund the police
Right.
by itself. And you know, with everything that's going on, with the election, with what Sean King had to say about Barack Obama, who kind of said some things about defund the police shouldn't be a term that people run with. And
Mm.
I ended up having conversations with certain people, different people, and it came up again. And I find myself, and I'm like, you know what? I should revisit this with you, and we
Mhm.
should have this conversation on air. So
Okay.
to kind of sum it up, I've been coming into conflict with my liberal brothers and sisters because I've recently found out that a majority of my liberal brothers and sisters are either progressive or much farther left than I am.
Okay.
And this is something that I didn't know. I knew that I had friends, brothers and sisters, friends, family members that were obviously liberal, right?
Mhm.
I didn't know that the majority of like my social media group or friends that I interact with were they pretty much identify as progressive or at the very least further left than center, right? Where
Mhm.
I've recently concluded and reconciled with myself that I flip flop between being a progressive and being a moderate as suited. You understand what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Depending on the issue, I certainly have a moderate position, and on certain issues, I have a very progressive position. I take a very progressive stance.
Okay.
And so one thing that has occurred to me is that, and I would dare to say, even when we first had the conversation, I got the idea that, and I know this isn't the case. This is just the best way I can describe it for your understanding because I know it's not the case. But I got the idea that your perspective was that I'm flawed for not understanding why the need to defund. Now I know that's not the case. I'm just using that as an example because that was the idea that I got. That's the general idea I get when I talk to people who support defund.
Okay.
When I like, if I say, listen, I'm not really keen on defund, the very next thing is I get a class on what defund is, and then I
Okay.
get a dialogue on why there needs to be defunding and why my position, me not being keen on it, like is a flaw, that I'm
Okay.
somehow flawed. So I wanted to kind of readdress it and revisit it and have a conversation about it. And I'd like to start off with you impartially, if you would, for me and for the viewing audience, so that we can have this conversation. If you could impartially define what defund is.
Yeah. This is the problem that I had last time is I wasn't as diligent as I would have liked to have been, and I don't like misrepresenting something so important.
Mm.
So I'll say I'll say what I know, but I really should I really should look to some notes to make sure that I'm expressing it correctly.
And for the viewing audience and anyone that may be listening, that's just how we get down. Mike is a sincere dude. We like to be right, and we like to be upright. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah,
all right, go on. I appreciate that, Mike.
yeah, and for me, it's just it's the movement is way too important for me to dilute it or mess it up with my with my level of understanding. That being said, my understanding of defund is it's a movement based on the fact that uh, the police system as it is woefully inadequate, um, partially because of the history of the police, um, the reason that it was formed, and its history of extreme racism and tracking down slaves and bringing them back, et cetera, et cetera. The history of of really oppressing black people after they were technically free, and helping to instill fear in them, and helping to protect white folks who felt fear when we were free. So part of it is based on the history that it has not strayed far away from. But when you get to the actual word defund, the idea is the police are the police are enacted to do things that they really shouldn't be doing. The police should be doing certain things like protecting folks from danger, you know, maybe helping folks stand down who are doing something dangerous like shooting at people or putting people in danger. Things that things that they would be specifically inclined or enacted to do based on based on who they are. Um, Things that they should not be doing include things that they are not trained to do, which includes interacting with members of the public who have, um, mental issues, especially black or people of color who have mental issues. That just really compounds the dangerous situations that we see happen between cops and members of the public. And even in some cases, I've been in areas where there were weird things happening, like there were weird things happening, like firemen having to do things that they shouldn't do, right? Like that are not in their purview, like other than fires and things like that. So in this case, it would be like, cops shouldn't be, they shouldn't be doing things that are just outside of their view. They shouldn't be, uh, kids acting up in school should not be approached by cops or put in a headlock or beat up by cops or any of that stuff. Um, so yeah, the idea of defund is if they're defunded, they only have the funding to do what they really should be doing, and they don't have the toys or the extra bandwidth, to be doing wellness checks and in my view, they should not be uh, stopping cars, randomly trying to see what's going on and like any of that stuff. To me, that's like some of the worst of it. They should not have any bandwidth to do that. Um, because then there's this whole idea of we're going to stop crime before it happens, which is very dangerous because it's like, who are you to figure something like that out? What tools are you going to use? You're going to basically profile people, right? Oh, look at that car. He's been rolling around kind of slow. Oh yeah, and it kind of hangs low to the ground. Oh yep, black driver. Let's get right over there. Right. So there's a lot of yeah, yeah.
So
Sorry, go ahead.
no. So I just wanted to one. I just want to because again. So I want you to break down for me how defund applies to what you everything that you said as far as your understanding of it. Like how does the actually defunding and
Yes.
then I also wanted to couple that with just a couple of things that you said. So two things that I wanted to touch on really quick is one, police are not mandated by law to protect and serve. Also, and that is in the sense that it's not prudent for police officers to just show up at every crime. They just don't even have the manpower. So because of that, they're not mandated by law to protect and serve. That's not a legal mandate. It certainly is an idea, and one that they run with and that they enjoy the privilege of running with, and people like to associate them as much as people like to say every time the army deploys somewhere they're fighting for our freedom, when the reality is they're not. You know what I mean? In some
Why
cases they certainly are,
did
but
I say that the did I
no,
say that
I'm
police are
just
okay?
no, you didn't say that at all.
Okay.
You were, well, you did use protect and serve, but I'm the one who's saying that, it's not a mandate. I'm just putting that out there just to put that out there for the viewing audience. And
Okay.
also just to be clear, the police absolutely, and this is something that we'll probably have to get into and talk about, and we can figure out and explore, but the police on paper, upheld in most courts and has been upheld several times, certainly can pull people over for reasonable suspicion of a crime going to be committed if they are wrong in carrying out that actual stop or that actual consensual, or either consensual or non-consensual engagement. Then it's litigated, and in most cases when it's litigated, people receive settlements. So I just wanted to throw that out. But yeah, they
Sure.
absolutely can operate under reasonable suspicion and upheld by law. It's been
Sure.
upheld
So
by there's several court cases that have upheld it.
I have a few issues with that. As a person who has had respect of leaders engaged in civil disobedience, um, the fact that something has been upheld in court, or the fact that something is or is not a mandate, is of interest to me,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
figuring out how to dismantle it or change it or fight it, or and figuring out where we stand now. But it
And just
certainly
just
doesn't.
just for the public record, we do both agree that civil disobedience is the act of breaking the law civilly.
I I mean, okay, I'll let you use those words for yourself. I mean, I
Well,
don't.
I don't know.
I
That's what I'm trying to say, because that's what it means. You're disobeying the law civilly. That's literally the definition of civil disobedience.
okay. I no, I understand. I just don't. For me, like saying breaking the law, to me, like I'm resisting or something like that. Like my whole orientation on these things is just different. And
Mm-hmm.
it's some of it's different than yours. So it's kind
No,
of
well,
like,
sorry, I just wanted to say I'm only going by what was laid forth in literature by both Gandhi and Martin Luther King on civil disobedience. Like, you, in the definition, like, you recognize that in most cases you are going to be arrested. They even teach you how to be arrested when you're carrying out civil disobedience.
that's not, yeah, that's not in question. I was just
Okay, okay.
I was just questioning the the actual way that it was laid forth. But I'd be interested in if if they're using those phrases, breaking the law, which is fine. I just have certain ways of seeing things. Like
Mm-hmm,
some of the progressive lawyers that we work with, um, like if you it like this isn't from personal experience, but from from the lawyers talking and whatnot, and just from other folks that I've seen who have been incarcerated. Um, like when you talk to fellow incarcerated people, you don't say, "So what did you do?" Right? You say, "What are you in for?" or "What did they get you for?"
mm-hmm.
Now that sounds a little bit like semantics, but
But
semantics,
I get it.
but the difference is, like, you're not assuming guilt, right? And even if you were assuming that they did something that was counter to the law, you're not assuming that that was something that was wrong, right? You're just assuming that the carceral state has put them in there for whatever reasons that they came up with, which may not even be correct, right? Because we know the judicial
Mm-hmm.
system is messed up. But anyways, that we're getting a little bit off topic, but that was my objection to agreeing with you, saying that's how we both
I get it. It's
feel.
interesting. I don't want to segue. I just wanted to say a couple years ago I had a conversation with somebody about not you. This doesn't apply to you. It's just what you said brings to memory a conversation I had with somebody about modern day civil disobedience versus inherently what civil disobedience is, right? Like inherently, and again, we lived in different times when civil disobedience as a mechanism was popularized as an effective weapon was popularized and implemented in our country. The time period was different, but during that time period, certainly civil disobedience was you knew you were guilty, you knew you were going to be arrested.
Mm-hmm.
So now certainly that has evolved. I'm sure the definition is now broader. Certainly there are different types of civil disobedience, the type of which we saw during Occupy, which to me was the worst kind. And again, this is a segue, was the worst kind because when confronted with the notion of being arrested, these people left and didn't return. Whereas, the era where our ancestors came from, they came back the next day. They'd get released from jail and show up the next day to be arrested again.
Well, that's your they is very broad. I mean, there
Black
there
people.
were there were there
I
were
mean, they
many
couldn't even
different groups.
put them
There were
put them
many
in a
different
fill the
groups.
prisons.
There were many different groups at Occupy, and some of them were hardcore activists who were definitely going to go back. Some of them might have been
Well,
some
Occupy
college
got
kids.
dispelled very easily because the bulk of these people were people who wanted to go to work the next day. I didn't like the Occupy move. I wasn't a fan. I was a fan of it in principle. I wasn't a fan of it in action.
Were you ever down there?
The down in New York in the Occupy movement or
Yeah.
in Buffalo?
Oh, well, that's a good question. That's a great question, actually.
I wasn't in the city. I certainly was downtown at Buffalo.
Okay. And so what you're talking about is in general the over Occupy overall or in Buffalo?
Well, overall, and the reason why I said overall is because so during Occupy, I did a lot of research. I did a lot of uh, uh, soul searching. I asked a lot of questions, and I got mission statements that were so diverse depending on the area of the country that was participating in the Occupy. And none of these mission statements reconciled with each other. I literally asked, I wish I could go back on my Facebook page. I literally asked for somebody to give me the mission statement. And in one thread, I probably got, I don't know, 20 different mission statements. I got summaries about things that had nothing to do with me. I remember a woman explained to me how she tried to break it down like I was sick. She was like, back in the day, dad would go to work and mom would prepare dinner and as soon as she started talking, I'm like, yo, I don't even understand that. That's never been my life. Like, so then the mission statement that mission statement doesn't apply to me. If you're talking about an American nuclear family and like that doesn't apply to me.
Yeah, I mean you spoke to an individual. I mean that's
No, I mean, no, that was just one of another one was a friend of mine who's very far left and politically active, and she posted the one from California, and it was like it said something like "We're here, move, big business move" or something like that. Like, and I'm like, these are mission statements, and so what I kind of got the understanding is that there was an idea that a whole bunch of people ran with, but this wasn't like a joint collaborative effort, which is
well,
why
I mean
it no longer
that's
it didn't last very long.
well, I mean that's kind of not true and it kind of is true. It really lasted a lot longer than the mainstream media showed. I mean, they kind of got bored with it, and it certainly didn't last in the large numbers it started out with. So, I mean, that's definitely true. But I mean, there were a core number of people that continued for quite some time.
And are they still
But
occupying?
I not that I know of. I mean, this was years ago, like 2011.
Okay. Either way, though, I segued and I didn't mean to. It just I wanted to pull you back. You were talking about defund. I had asked you how defund applied to your understanding. Everything that you had laid out. I'm just trying to reconcile defund with like what is it that we're defunding?
Okay, so I mean, you you can't enable work without funding, right? So if I'm saying like if you're saying, oh, according to the law, they can stop you and they can decide even before you've committed a crime that they're going to I don't want to put words in your mouth, whatever you said, whatever their reason is, their reasonable suspicion or whatever they use as an excuse to profile people. Um, and then we're gonna have to go through the courts and then litigate and then like get some compensation afterwards, as if um, you could put a dollar amount on the embarrassment of being treated a certain way or um, on just like not being free to move a certain way. Um, the defunding would mean they would not actually be able to do that because they wouldn't have the funding to do that. They'd have the funding to
Yep.
do something else. They'd have the funding
No.
to walk the beat in communities, to to be
So
on
we're not taking the
call.
funding away. We're diverting the funding.
Well, I mean, if you want to put those words, if you want to
No,
give me
it's a
those
question.
words,
It's a question.
I mean, sure, sure. I mean, well, I mean, well. Here's the thing, like, I, see, well, actually, we didn't know because we didn't get to there yet. So you're actually, I mean, technically, I don't say this like in aggression, but technically, you either A, are putting words into my mouth, or B, we're actually jumping the gun into a conversation we're eventually going to get into anyway.
Well,
Um,
no, the reason why I put it as a question, I definitely wasn't putting words in your mouth. You said, you said, you know, where you described a scenario where they can't do certain things if they don't have the funding, but then you
right.
said you use the word funding in association with walking the beat.
Yeah,
So then that led me
but
to
they
the
already,
question.
right. But so my answer to you is they already have funding for that. This isn't, this isn't diverting. Um, maybe I said it wrong because what I'm saying is like you don't have the money to do this. You just have the money to do that, right? So it's not a diversion. It's taking the money away and allowing you to focus on what you still have money left to do, which is
All right,
those
so
other
here's where
things
I'm
that are
confused, and not about what you're saying. What
okay.
when you say take the money away, right? So if cops work, I don't know, 8 to 12 hours a day, what it seems to me the problem is what cops choose to do versus, excuse me, as opposed to what they're paid to do. It's what they choose to do with their time, rather than like we pay you this much and then you go out and you do this. I don't know if we should take the money away for, not from what cops get paid, but from the police department versus looking at what it is you choose to do with your time while we're funding you.
Okay, so a few things. It's very well documented, especially where I live, that police budgets are highly overbloated. They are
but
very,
but
very
but that's
bloated.
that's that's actually, and you're right. That's some a conversation I was having with somebody today specifically broke down exactly what you just said. How in the Northeast in particular, you have that situation, but then you have a huge disparity in the South.
Yeah, but I mean, a huge disparity, as in what they don't have enough money to do what they have to
They
do.
don't have nearly the funding that we have here, which is the reason why here cops go to academy for 6 months, and in the South, in many cases, 6 weeks, because they just can't keep police.
Well, there's more, there is even more issues that we're bringing up now because training is woefully inadequate as well. But okay, so going back to the funding, regardless of whatever's happening um, down south, in general, uh, what happens is so police don't like choose to do anything, right? Like they're in a system. Like we don't like hire Johnny and we're like, you have 9 to 5, you know, choose your own adventure. Like he is like, shit rolls downhill. he's mandated to do certain things. Um, when when they started deciding they were going to stop messing with people for smoking pot, one of the things they did was, I believe, I believe this is what they did. If I'm not speaking out of turn, one of the things they did was that they may have just used a mandate. They may have just said, look, like you don't you don't have to do this anymore. Like there's no benefit from like busting people for pot. Um, but another way, I don't know, another way to do these things, like if you don't have if you don't have the manpower to do it, right? Like whatever budget they're using, there's different things going on in the city and different things that they're spending money on. And if you only have so much funding, then like you're just not going to be able to do some of it. I don't know if they can actually go into the budget and say specifically, like, hey, like, uh, any funds that were being used on stop and frisk are being pulled. So please do not stop and frisk anymore. Do the other stuff that you're doing. I don't know how budgets, I don't know how budgets work or how those mandates.
And neither do I. It's kind of hard to come to a hard line conclusion on, like, when you say choose your own adventure, like, how do we know what the average beat cop does or doesn't do? How do we know that everything that he does is with licensure versus I'm just on the beat?
Well, but even that's a specific area of work, right?
Right.
So even like walking the beat is a specific area. Like if you pull, beat cop
Walking or
funding,
driving, just patrolling.
right? If you pull patrols, then you don't have patrols, right?
What does
So
that
even
sound to pull patrols?
I'm making an example.
Yeah, no.
I'm just making an example, just
Mhm.
based on funding. But like, anyways, the people who came up with this is why I didn't want to get into the minutia because I don't have the language to describe this, and I don't want to fuck this up. But the people who came up with this, like, who do know this stuff, they wanted to defund because they understand, like, the one thing that I learned in DC is, like, for anything to get done, you have to look at the budget. So like a politician can talk shit to you until he's blue in the face, but if they don't have the budget line item to actually do it, whether it's fund pre-K from 0 to 3 and make what do you call it, childcare learning free, or make pre-K, or watching your kids free, like, so you don't have to worry about that. um it has to be budgeted, so like they can talk about it and they can make it sound cool and they can say this is our policy. But if at the end of the day, Mayor Bowser does not put this as a budget line item, it's not going to be done. So the whole defund the police thing is like understanding, like, budgets, how they work, and like what's getting done. And they're saying, like, pull the funding.
But so then my question would be: are these people intimately? Do they have intimate knowledge of the communities that could be affected adversely, if at all, by
These
defunding,
people,
or are they
these
just
people,
people who crunch numbers?
no, these people are activists. These people are people who get arrested, and like these people are like the people who have been fighting for us for like years. Like
Yeah,
these are the
but
people who have been
so
in the streets getting beat, like fighting for this stuff.
yes, no, that's not my question though. There's a difference between being an activist and having an intimate knowledge and intimate experience with living in the communities that could or could not be as adversely affected.
No,
There's just a difference.
that was my answer. I answered you. These people
Oh,
do.
and the reason why I'm
These
asking you
people
is
do
because
live in the community.
I've lived in communities in several different areas of the country, several different areas of the world, certainly in my city, and I don't see these activists. I see them on social media platforms. I see them on television. I even know a few. I'm even friends with a few, but they're
Well,
not.
these people existed before social media.
Yeah,
This isn't new.
I understand that. What I'm saying is I don't see the activism. I used to have this conversation with a friend of mine. His name is Chris, and I used to tell him it's interesting that people use the term leaders fighting for us when it comes to the black community, yet like they're not accessible to us, especially the communities that you say you want to improve. Like, and this is just, it is what it is. Like, you're not accessible. You don't live down the street. You don't hang
But a
out on the
lot of
block.
these, a lot of these people do. A lot of these people do come from communities that are most affected.
Well, I just haven't seen that represented in a Ta-Nehisi Coates and I'm just throwing out, I know it has anything to do with defund, but I'm just throwing things like I haven't seen that type of representation in the communities. And it's interesting because, a lot of the people that I talk to from the communities would tell you the same thing.
Well, Ta-Nehisi Coates
So they're,
is famous. The people that are doing the work in the community are like they're doing like thankless like work behind the scenes. It's not like I don't know.
well,
You might
that's,
see it like in the back. You might see some like on page 12 or something like
well,
something that
well,
doesn't
so
get
for,
fanfare.
and I get it, and that's cool. And for me, it's like the Cape Crusader, so to say. It's like Batman. But and I'm not being smart. What I mean is, there's a reason why we're having this conversation. I'm an
Hmm.
intelligent person who cares about my community, who grew up in the hood, and I am concerned.
Yeah.
And I'm not the only person who's concerned. Other people like me, who I talk to, are also concerned. How is this going to impact us? It's easy, especially for white people, to run with the word defund while they have the opportunity to live their lives oblivious to the nuances that
So
goes on in marginalized communities. And
so
when I
this
say
is
this, like,
sorry. Go ahead.
so I just wanted to point that out because I talk to people who don't like police, who certainly have reason to fear the power that police wield, who certainly have been impacted like directly by police. The people that are fighting for them probably haven't been impacted in the way that these people have been on a regular basis, who are telling me, and we got to bring some of them on the show, who are telling me and having these conversations like, what does it mean for the community? Like, what does defund really mean for the community? Has anyone really looked at and scrutinized if there is an adverse impact?
Yeah. I mean, they have been for a while, and to be honest, um, much longer than most of us have even heard these words, defund the
So what's the
police.
adverse impact?
I'm I started off by telling you I'm not one of these activists, so like
Oh, okay, okay.
I don't have the answer. Don't use me to like,
No, we're having a
whatever
conversation. Like,
yeah, I just don't want to be like the person that's like, you know, not giving people good information because this is already like a highly um it's already a highly controversial issue, and it's just too easy for like everyone, including our people, to like, go off on this stuff. So
well,
what I want
again, I
to
just
counter,
want to restate that when I say that I'm not keen on defund, I I in all cases get made to feel a certain way. So I figure we have a show. Me and you had a conversation about it. I had a conversation with other people. We might as well like flesh it out. And who cares? I get you've I think you've made a disclaimer. So if
yeah.
people take you the wrong way, then something is wrong with them. It's
Well,
clear that you're
it's not
only
about me
speaking.
being taken the wrong way. It's just that I don't want to be like one of these people on Hannity and Combs where
No,
like
no, no. But that's what I was saying. It's clear. Like, you've made it clear that you're only speaking from your own limited understanding
yeah,
and that you need to do more research. I don't want you to be
yeah,
handcuffed. You understand what I'm saying? Because
right.
like we've made this clear, and that's what I mean. If people take you the wrong way, something is wrong with them because you've made it clear. Like, you have been
Yeah.
more than clear that
Well, again,
you're only
it's not
speaking
about
from your understanding.
it's not about me being taken the wrong way. It's just about not having a position that's as strong as the criticisms are, right? That's why I kind of like want to go into a conversation like knowing my shit because
Mm.
there's too much at stake. So for me to
Well,
like fall back
I'll say
on,
some things.
well, I don't really know. Wait, before you do, I've
Mhm.
gotta,
Go, yeah, please,
uh,
please, please.
I've gotta state this because this is the elephant, the ashy elephant in the room that's been here the whole time that I didn't recognize. Is that you stated some things about white this and black that? Ish, these are black people doing this. These defund people, these are black people. So the
I know.
whole idea that some white folks off in somewhere else are telling us to defund, not knowing how it's going to affect our community, black people came up with this shit. That's all I wanted to relate. That
So
that has to be
I'm
that
definitely
has to be.
aware, which is the reason why I went into that line of conversation about those who represent us, who lead us, who fight for us. I was speaking about black people.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so that's yeah, I know, but I also know that the sentiment that is resounding, right? When I go online, I could count on my hands the black people that are talking about defund. You're one of them. I don't have enough fingers to count the white people.
Well, you should friend all of my friends. Then there's plenty of them.
So I'll say some things. There's ideas that I have, right? And again, when I say I'm not keen on defund, from my understanding of it, I'm not keen on defund by itself. Meaning, as I said to you offline, like what are some other solutions that we have to choose from? What is this the only solution? Is this the be on end all? And I totally understand. Like money is certainly the root for sure. Like that's just always the root, and it should be. But for me, my 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 position is, I served in the military. So for
Hmm.
me, I simplify it, right? Like I think that the police shouldn't lose funding. I think that the police should be trained in similar fashion. So I don't think things should be taken out of their purview. What I think is, I think that police should be trained in similar fashion as military members. If you go into the military to be in the medical field, you're going to go to your basic training for however many months. And then you're going to go to a very long school because you're not going in to be an infantry guy. You're going to be in the medical field. So the school that you go to is going to be you're going to be in your tech or training school for a long time. So, in the military, a friend of mine, we were having this conversation. He's in the military as well. The military does this all the time. Like they train everybody for everything. And if they can do it, if they can take Joe Blow off the street or Joe Blow with a college degree, if you come into the police academy with a college degree and you specialize in what have you, then after you get out of the training, the physical training portion of your academy, which is like 6 to 8 months, you then go to school. And we'll redivert the money there, but you'll go to school to be a detective in this field, or in mental health. You will go to school for this, or in whatever it is. The military does this all the time. They break down, each branch breaks down into hundreds of different military specialities, or MOSs, job titles. And for each one of those job titles, you are trained like off the street. You're trained for it. And every branch of the military does this. And I don't think that the police should be militarized, but I certainly think that every guy who comes off the street shouldn't have the same pathway, because then you kind of end up with kind of where we're at now, because it's just some guy off the street and his pathway is the same as the guy standing next to him, is the same as the guy standing next to him. Well, no, you join the military, we give you like the police force, we give you like an ASVAB test, which is in the military. You take an ASVAB test. If you score a certain number, then every job under that number is accessible to you, and you pick the one you want to do, and then we'll train you to do it. If you don't score high enough, then only these jobs are available to you, and we'll train you to do that. Like, I think we should pay for that. We should have these tests set up, so before you get into the police academy, you know what jobs are available to you based upon your schooling and based upon your score. And
So
then you're
here's
going.
the deal. Here's the deal. Like the problem is like when you ask like, did they think about other things? Did they think about, you know, effects, adverse or otherwise. I mean, we've been dealing with this shit for a long time now, for hundreds of years. So the issue is like we want like real substantive change. Um, we want shit to be dramatically different. Now, I think the picture you're painting is good because it is different from what we have, and it's different than simple reform, which a lot of people push, which just doesn't go far enough. But I think what we're not talking about is where this like um where this negativity is coming from as far as like dealing with people of the public who are black. Um and until we get that, until we can deal with that, um I think having a test for someone and having different tracks for people who are interested in different things and score differently, it's not going to address, the fact that we have a racist system set up. Um, and
Until we
that's a
can deal
pro.
with what?
Well,
Just clarify that.
until we can deal with until we can deal with like the racism that is intertwined with our police system, right? Like whether
So
it's
I think we're on different sides of a coin as far as subjectivity, because I think that's subjective, right? Like what are and I want you to say what you're saying. I'm sorry. I think it's subjective in the sense that my perspective is just we've been dealing with it for hundreds of years.
yeah. Well, we agree there. We certainly agree.
So it's I think we're on two different sides of a coin in the sense that we've been dealing with it. Like we have been dealing with it.
Yeah, but not. this is like this is like you're dealing with something, but not in a good way. Like we're not making headway,
So
right?
I think we have on one end your position, not your position, but the position is defund versus my position is divert the funds,
Right.
change the culture from the school, from the academy level, change the culture. That way, when they
So
say,
how
well, police
so how do
shouldn't be
we
dealing with
change
mental health,
how do we change the
you
culture?
when they say, well, police shouldn't be dealing with mental health, if you have people, this is the military culture is successful.
Hmm.
This is like the military has been through it all, right? Chauvinism, racism, misogyny, they've been through it all, and the culture overall is successful because
Hmm.
they adapt to, they adapt to these things and they overcome it at the lowest level, at the training level. So when they say, well, police shouldn't be responding to mental health, well, there are some issues that police certainly should respond to, even though it's mental health. So if you have police officers that from the day one of training are designed are trained to be on scene and deal with that and can say, to these other cops who are not, okay, y'all need to fall back. Okay, we have this. Okay, y'all can't handle this like this. We're trained to do this. This is what we went to. This is why we're cops. This is what we do. Yes, you showed up on the scene. Good job. You gotta, just like you gotta wait to get the dog to search the car, you have to wait till we show up
So my
before you can.
question is my question is why though? Why would we want them responding to those situations when there are other people in the community who would be better equipped to do so?
Well, because it's the same. It's the argument is the same no matter how you put it, right? Because if because we're talking mental health doesn't remove the idea that someone who suffers from mental health issues is not committing a crime. So then, if they are, and somebody shows up who isn't, say, in law enforcement or equipped to handle the criminal aspect, so you have the same argument on both sides of the fence, then you'd be saying, well, why would we want people to show up who aren't equipped to deal with the crime? So you're not wrong.
Well,
It's just
the issue here that we're dealing with there's something wrong with our criminal justice system. That's the issue. That's the issue that we're dealing with today. So, I mean, I think we're saying, um,
Well, there's
you know,
certainly something wrong with our social service system too.
that is true. That is a good point. Um, that's certainly a good point. However, you know, the problems that we've seen with the criminal justice system and police being put in lanes that they're not supposed to have have been, I think, even more dramatic. Now, one question I have to ask you is like, in all of this discussion and debate that we've been having,
Hmm.
including today,
Hmm.
um, why are you reticent to decrease funding, even in places where the funding is bloated and overdone? Like, why isn't there at least an admission that, you know, like when we say divert fund, okay, so I guess we should get this language right. When we say divert funding, defund, I mean we're looking at a city's budget, right?
Hmm.
Part of the city's budget goes to the police, part of it goes to social services, including mental
Hmm.
health, etc. So, I mean, I think I don't know. Maybe we're just agreeing. Maybe it's just the language. So when I say defund, but yes, I said later on we would get into this conversation.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think we should be looking at other places in the city's budget where we can divert those funds, right? So yeah, I
So
don't
I
mean
don't
I don't
mean
mean
in the
just pulling.
city's budget. I mean in the police. So what I mean by divert is, so what I think needs to happen is there needs to be oversight. And I think that the funds shouldn't be cut, but they should be better managed. Like you need a better accountant, you need a better business planner, you
But
need a
but what
better
if what if they do
financial
have
planner.
what if they do have too much funding though?
Well,
You're gonna
see,
let
here's
them
the
keep
thing.
you're gonna let them keep that funding when we can't even keep schools open and we don't even have like jobs
Well,
for
so
like
that's
the
not
youth
fair.
and like
You make a good point. You make an excellent point, but it's not fair because the idea of defunding the police didn't stem because we had lack of funding for school. Like that's not
actually
the motive.
actually you should look well I'd be I okay, so if school isn't one of them, things that affect uh society and crime actually are, right? And like, so when we always talk about education, we talk about jobs, we talk about things that affect our communities, uh, that can impact us with like violence and negativity and things like that. And like education, jobs, those things are usually things that we are underfunded in
And
that
and
we
and
want to
this is
fund.
fair. But let me speak to your question though. So for me, defund can't be a blanket statement, right? Like how does it work across the country, right? So does the idea, is it something that it's by percentage? We evaluate what police forces in what areas have more funds and which don't, like the small town with the sheriff and a couple deputies versus New York City or LA, or is it defund like a blanket
No,
where
no. I
on a
mean,
national level?
see, here's the good thing about having a conversation and about enacting policy. You can do the smartest thing that you want to do. So you don't have to leave this conversation and be like, well, Mike said defund's just a blanket, so fuck it.
No, no, that was the question.
No, no,
Certainly.
no, but no, no, no. But this is my answer to you: is
Hmm.
we can do it as smart and as local as we want to do it, right? Because some say to our detriment the fact that the police is not like a national force, that there's all these municipalities, right, around the
Which is the
country,
case.
right, that have their own. Some say that makes it more difficult because there's no uniformity. But yes, like uh, my answer to you is absolutely, of course. Yeah, that's my answer. Like, yeah, of course, we don't want deform to be done in like a stupid unilateral way. That's not going to help anyone. And I think it totally makes sense that like some small area where the sheriff is also the judge and also the barber and also all that stuff. Like You can't defund that person. There's gonna be that person's like already got his back to the wall if anything goes down. He's probably got to call like his cousins to help him, if anything goes down, especially
Now,
something from out of town.
now,
So
also,
yeah,
are we talking about a tactical drawdown?
I mean, we it should yeah, we want to do it in the smartest way possible.
No,
Like
I mean tactical, as in as far as like munitions and weaponry.
I haven't read that part of the proposal. But I mean, you and I have spoken that I know that part of the criticism of bloated budgets is that uh, some police forces have like an amazing, military budget style access to like, weaponry and what they call toys and like things that they just it's there's no reason to have. And keep in mind this is in reaction to what we've been seeing, right? This isn't like someone decided let's try something new. This is like, I mean, we've been dealing with these issues, decade after decade, and it's like, I mean, to use the word frustrating is just it's just wrong, but it's just like just remember like how many Mike Browns and Trayvon Martins there were, and like how many people that we can't even remember their names, right? I mean, think they have like I don't know, maybe they have shirts or they have murals or I've at least seen some pictures or memes where they have every name, and it's a lot. So at the end of the day, whatever we're doing, it's not working, and people are smart, people have empathy, people have backgrounds in policy, people have backgrounds in activism and movements, people have backgrounds in winning against systems, which is probably, one of the hardest things you could do is to change a system, which is connected to the culture, which is connected to, I mean, at the end of the day, people are like addicted to the devil that they know. So even if it's killing them, the fear of this new system, what are we going to do if we defund the police, sounds so scary that people would rather just what, like watch horrible things keep happening to their black children.
Hmm. Well, it's been interesting. It's an interesting conversation to have.
Yeah, I think would you and I definitely have some points of interest and agreement on that whole idea about the military's ability to hold its people accountable and to train them well. I mean, you and I have talked about that a lot, and I've actually been the one to bring it up, saying, you know, you, you get in trouble in the military for drawing your weapon on someone when there's no reason, and you can't just say, "Oh, I feared for my life." Like these are
Yep.
people who are actually at war, right? Like you're in a battle, you're in a war ground. Like you're in a battleground where sometimes people who look like civilians end up doing crazy things to your comrades, and that situation, you know, you would have a lot more you would have a
Leeway.
lot more
You
yeah,
think you would
leeway.
have leeway.
Exactly, you would at least have a lot more empathy from civilians saying, well, look, he's in a battleground where people who look like little kids are doing horrible things. So like you would at least have people on your side in that sense. But no, they're still being held accountable way more than the police are. So I think there's a lot of middle ground there or we agree. Now, I don't know what it is about uh, the culture or what it is. I think I think we'd have to get into it, but yeah, I think there's just a totally different history and therefore a different attitude. And while it obviously hasn't been perfect, and there have been things that have happened uh, with the military, it's just held to a much higher standard where we feel like the police can get away with anything. And some of it's just the way the laws are set up, right? The way the DAs are in bed with you know, uh, in bed with the police and everything. It's pretty hard to like get a conviction or you know to hold people accountable. So there's definitely something there. Um, yeah, there's something there. There's something there. I think for people who have been dealing with this for a long time, I think they'd probably rather something radical and see what happens and see how we can work with it from there instead of continuing what we have and trying to change it from what we have. So I think part of the idea of defund is like a radical shift rather than reform. And speaking of Barack Obama, I haven't read the words, but I've seen it mentioned in several tweets from uh, from folks, and I know some folks on the left are not happy with what he's been saying, and they're basically saying he needs to like chill out and like not talk about defund. But this goes back to what we said before was like defund, the idea of defund. The people who came up with it were radicals. They were activists. They weren't people trying to create some kind of phrase that middle America would like easily understand or get. That wasn't that wasn't it. Now, what happens from there? Um, what happens from there is going to be interesting because it's like, does the message get diluted if more mainstream folks try to run with it and try to shape it in a way that people can get behind? Um,
Well, that's kind of the thing, right? That's usually that's art of war. That's the strategy, right? Dilute the message. We that was a regular theme of ours, a little while back about
from the
co-opting.
opposition, you mean?
Right? Yeah, for sure,
Oh, I see.
for sure.
I'm reading that book, by the way.
Art of War.
Hmm.
Yeah, read it all the time. Like